On today's episode, the Chicago Blackhawks lost their third consecutive preseason game last night, falling 4-1 to the Minnesota Wild. I'll go over what went wrong for the Hawks, Colton Dach's impressive debut, and some thoughts on the final roster ahead of Saturday's preseason finale. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
Your Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Today is Friday, October 7th. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at Jack Bushman2, or you can also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And if you're listening to the audio version of today's episode and you like what you're hearing, then please be sure to go and show some support first by following the podcast. Go and rate the show with 5 stars as well. And if you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, then you can also go and leave me a review. And the best part about it all is that it's 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Go and follow the show right now, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And if you're not already watching the video version of today's episode, then you got to be sure to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, because every episode, moving forward is going to have a video uploaded as well. So if you haven't checked out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube already, please be sure to go and do so and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate all the help, folks. Go and smash the like button on this video as well. And last, go and ring the bell, turn on those push notifications, and that way you can get notified when the episode gets uploaded to YouTube each and every day. All right, enough of that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. And thank you all for making the show your first listen here to start off your day, even though the episode is coming out a little bit later on in the morning. I apologize for that. I had to wait for our studio through Restream to open up with Locked On Hawkeyes having a show come out this morning. Locked On Bulls just went live. So kind of had to wait for a couple things to clear up before I could jump on into the studio. But thank you all for waiting for today's episode to come out. And to open things up on the show this morning, let's get right into the Chicago Blackhawks 4-1 loss to the Minnesota Wild last night. But before I get into the game itself, I did first want to dive into the lineup that Coach Luke Richardson decided to roll with last night, because in the past couple of days at practice, we've seen Richardson hit the blender, and the line combos and the D pairings were a bit shuffled up compared to what we've seen so far in training camp. So I wanted to make sure to talk for at least a minute about the lineup that Richardson elected to roll with last night. First, no Patrick Kane for the Blackhawks. Patrick Kane was a healthy scratch last night, which is something I honestly don't know if I've ever said while covering this team. I don't recall Kane, or even in the preseason, ever being a healthy scratch before. Now, obviously, there are games where he's not going to be in the lineup, especially when that training camp roster has 30 or 40 guys. Some guys are going to play one night, some guys are going to play the other, but I've never seen Patrick Kane kind of be the odd man out of a lineup. Like, he was the only guy really that was a true healthy scratch last night for the Blackhawks, but I understood why they did it. They had to get some other guys a few more looks. Andreas Athanasiou, Philip Kurashev was someone who got bumped up in the lineup, as I'll get into in a moment. We also saw Colton Dach make his preseason debut for the Blackhawks, and I'll dedicate a whole segment to Colton Dach's debut that I'll get into here in just a moment. But with Patrick Kane out of the lineup, the Blackhawks offense still kind of struggled as a whole. Not too surprising. Feels like it's going to be another year where the Blackhawks offense is kind of weighing on Patrick Kane's shoulders, and sure his back is going to be sore from carrying this offense all season long. But anyways, getting into the lineup that Richardson went with last night, on the top line, we saw Tyler Johnson, Jonathan Toews, and then in the past couple of practices, Patrick Kane was the one on the right wing there. Richardson has elected to go back to Toews and Kane on the same line. We'll see if that winds up being the case in the preseason finale tomorrow against St. Louis. But with Kane out last night, Andreas Athanasiou was actually the man who jumped up into that top line role. The second line was Philip Kurashev, Max Domi, and Taylor Radish. They were probably the most effective trio for the Blackhawks last night. Again, as I already referenced, not a whole lot going on offensively, but I thought that line combination was definitely the most effective for the Blackhawks. On the third line, we saw Colton Dach, Sam Lafferty, and Mackenzie Entwistle. And then down on the fourth line, we saw Colin Blackwell, Reese Johnson, and Buddy Robinson, who I still don't really know how to feel about him. I didn't particularly like his game last night. He had a really bad turnover that led to the Wild's opening goal of the game. Just kind of seems like a physical guy. And while I get that's probably what the Blackhawks want in their bottom six, I personally would rather have Dylan Sikura be the extra forward on this opening night roster. But after being placed on waivers for the purpose of being reassigned to Rockford, we know that Sikura is not going to be on the Hawks opening night roster. And then on defense, pretty thin for the Blackhawks, considering that Connor Murphy is still day-to-day. Caleb Jones is still day-to-day. Murphy's nursing a back injury. Jones is nursing a shoulder injury. And then, of course, Jake McCabe is still recovering from the neck surgery that he underwent not all that long ago. So with all three of those guys not playing last night, the Blackhawks defense, not the strongest. Jack Johnson and Seth Jones were the top D pairing. Alex Vlasic and Philip Rose was the second combination. Philip Rose continues to stick around. Thought he kind of struggled last night, though, personally. And then the third pairing was Riley Stillman and Alec Regula with Alex Stalock in net. So that was the lineup that the Blackhawks elected to roll with. We'll see if the lines or D pairings change in practice here today or in the morning skate tomorrow ahead of that preseason finale. I just wanted to make sure to mention that here for a second so you all are kind of caught up on what Luke Richardson is rolling with as of right now, as we're just 5 days away from the season opener against the Avalanche. But getting into the game itself last night, yeah, not a good look from the Blackhawks. Pretty similar to what we've seen so far out of this team in the preseason. Not much offense whatsoever. I thought the defense, though, structure-wise, did a pretty good job in the goaltending. I mean, the goaltending was really solid. I got to give credit to Alex Stalock for playing well once again. I mean, he's been pretty solid so far in this preseason and might have had a little extra chip on his shoulder considering that he's a Minnesota guy and played for the Wild for a couple of seasons. Alex Stalock did his job last night. I don't think you can blame him on a single goal that the Blackhawks gave up. But I did think the defense played better. I didn't think it was a poor performance from the defense. What really killed them, though, was just a couple of mental breakdowns, couple of miscues, a poor line change, couple of poor line changes, actually. Those just small mistakes were still evident from time to time. In Minnesota, being a good team, being a team that should be contending for a spot in the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, they capitalized on their opportunities, as good teams tend to do. And the Blackhawks just really didn't capitalize on theirs. But as I mentioned earlier, all the goals for Minnesota really came via breakdowns from the Blackhawks. I already mentioned Buddy Robinson had that bad turnover that led to the opening goal. Both the second and third goals for Minnesota was scored on breakaways, so kind of got lost in coverage. A couple of bad line changes too. And then the fourth goal came by another turnover. This one was from Jonathan Taves, and then the Hawks defense just kind of got caught in scramble zone, lost their guys, and it was a tap-in for who I forget who tapped in. It doesn't even matter, but another, breakdown there from the Blackhawks. And again, just got to give credit where credit is due to Minnesota for being the team that took advantage of their opportunities last night, because the Blackhawks, they did not. Once again, the power play issues too remain very prevalent. The Blackhawks were 0 for 6 on the man advantage last night, and it felt like they had 10 or 11 power plays. I mean, basically the entire third period was like Minnesota handed them an opportunity to at least make this thing interesting, and the Blackhawks just couldn't get anything going on. I mean, they moved the puck around well, but didn't get any high quality danger scoring opportunities. I think they got to get guys to the front of the net, make life difficult for the opposing goaltender. The one goal they did score last night came from a slapper by Jack Johnson at the blue line, and Tyler Johnson, the Johnsons there. Good work by Tyler in front to take away the vision of the Wild netminder. I think that's something the Blackhawks need to focus on more so on the power play, because right now everything's just out on the perimeter, nothing in dangerous areas, and they're not really getting second or third looks. It's just kind of one and done. And even half the time last night, they couldn't get anything set up. So lots of work still to be done for the Blackhawks on the power play before that season opener. By the way, the Hawks are now 1 for 21 on the man advantage in 5 preseason games. And look, I get that Patrick Kane was out last night, but there have been plenty of preseason games that he's played in where the Blackhawks power play didn't look good either. So certainly that's something that needs to be worked on. And offensively as a whole, I mean, just not good enough. We saw the Hawks get shut out in back-to-back games last weekend. Only 1 goal last night against the Wild. They have 1 goal in their last 180 minutes of play, in 6 total in 5 preseason games, with 4 of those coming in 1 game against Detroit. So on the offensive side of things right now, it just hasn't been good enough. And I still think the team is way too passive with the pucks on their stick. They're trying to make the perfect play, the perfect pass, and even when they do get some looks, it's like guys just aren't converting on their chances. Max Domi had a prime breakaway look last night. Puck flubs off his stick. Andres Athanasiou, I mean, keeps getting chances night in, night out. Hasn't been able to bury one of them. Jonathan Toews, I thought, looked really sloppy last night too. It just hasn't been good from the guys we expect to be doing stuff offensively, and that's why the Blackhawks, I mean, are having trouble finding the back of the net right now. So yeah, it's been a struggle. Could be foreshadowing an offensive problem for the Hawks once the season opens. 6 goals in 5 preseason games so far. Not good enough. The offense was stymied once again last night in the 4-1 loss to the Minnesota Wild. All right. There are some of my key thoughts on the Blackhawks' 3rd consecutive preseason loss last night. Coming up in just a moment, I will talk about Colton Dach's impressive preseason debut. But first, I need to talk to you all about BetOnline. BetOnline is your #1 source for all pro and college football needs and sports info this season. BetOnline is also, let me pull that up there real quick. Shout out to BetOnline. BetOnline is also the place to find all of the latest football developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts on whatever game you want to place a wager on. BetOnline is the continued source for all sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and game scores. It's both the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and even golf. So head on over to the website right now, or you can also use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game begins. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. For segment 2 on the show today, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to dedicate an entire segment to talk for a few moments about one of the only bright spots from last night's loss to Minnesota, and that was 2021 second-round pick Colton Dach in his preseason debut. Of course, Dach had been out for the past couple of weeks while in concussion protocol. Suffered that in the second of 2 games against the Minnesota Wild, actually, as part of the Tom Curver's Prospect Showcase that was held at Fifth Third Arena. Early on in that game, Colton Dach absolutely housed a shot past Jesper Wallstedt to kick off the scoring. Looked really good, I thought, throughout the camp and also in the preseason, especially that shot of his, which I'll talk more about here in just a moment. Unfortunately, though, suffered a concussion somewhere along the way in that second game and has been out ever since, which was quite unfortunate. I really was looking forward to seeing more of Colton Dach in the preseason and going up against, some older competition and grown men to kind of help gauge exactly where his game is at and what he kind of needs to work on in order to continue to keep rising through the ranks. So it sucked that we missed out that opportunity to see more of Dach. Same with Paul Ludwinski in the same boat. I really wanted to see how these 2 youngsters fared against some better competition, but great to see that Dach was able to get in for a game last night. I was really happy with the Blackhawks' decision to keep him around in hopes of a moment like this, to give him at least 1 game just to kind of help the front office understand a little bit better of where exactly he's at right now. I was really happy that they got Colton Dach in there for a game, even though I do expect him to go back to juniors here probably before Saturday's preseason finale. I feel like the Blackhawks would want their lineup to be basically what they're going to roll with on Wednesday against Colorado. So with Dach, obviously not having a chance of cracking the opening night lineup, I think it would be a safe assumption that he's going back to Kelowna here probably in the next 24 hours if I had to guess. But in his one game of preseason action, really excited about Colton Dach and his future because quite honestly, I thought he was one of the better Blackhawks last night. And I know it's not exactly a high bar because the team didn't look very good as a whole. But Colton Dach, I saw other people say, he was the best player for the Blackhawks last night. And I understand why, because what he provides is actually really, really nice right now, especially when the Blackhawks have been so reluctant to shoot the puck all preseason long, trying to get those perfect plays, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Colton Dach is kind of a synopsis of what this team really needs to do, and that's just shoot the puck whenever you have an opportunity. And that's something I mentioned and was evident with Dach throughout, the entire summer that he was healthy for. Like every time he has the puck in the offensive zone, he's going to trust his shot over trying to make a pass. Now, I don't know if that's just he feels like he should be shooting the puck at all times and he really believes in his shot, or if he's just a shoot first guy. Whatever the case may be, Colton Dach calls upon his own number more times than not when he's got the puck in the offensive zone. And it's usually a right decision because I think his shot is his best asset and gives him the best chance of making it to the NHL level. And it's kind of funny how he's the polar opposite of Kirby Dach. Like throughout Dach's time in Chicago when he was still here, seemed like he was always trying to defer to his line mates and wasn't ever really aggressive with the puck on his stick. Colton is the exact opposite. Like there could be an open guy, could be a 2-on-1 and there's a chance to make a pass there, but he's going to shoot it. That's just the type of player that he is. And with the Blackhawks having these offensive struggles as a whole, it was a breath of fresh air last night. And now maybe some of the shots that he took were a little bit forced and maybe not the best choice. But as Eddie Olczyk has mentioned, sadly won't be mentioning anymore on the Blackhawks broadcast, good things happen when you put the puck on net. And Colton Dach was creating more than basically anyone last night because he was shooting the puck. On the power play, he's hammering home one-timers, just trying to make something happen. And when the Blackhawks have 6 goals in 5 preseason games, that's the right idea. Just simplify the game, make the easy play in front of you. And Colton Dach was doing that last night. And because of it, he was one of the more effective players. So I was really happy with what I saw out of Colton Dach. Again, I think he kind of forced the shot a little bit, but it's still a bit refreshing to see when none of the other players on the Blackhawks really want to do that. And I also liked Dach's game away from the puck. He had 3 hits last night, forced a takeaway. He also drew a penalty, so he was making an impact in all areas of the ice. He really, really played well in his 14 minutes of action, I thought. So, yeah, I'm excited about Colton Dach's future. Like I mentioned already, he is going to be going back to Kelowna here shortly, but should be in line for a massive season with the Rockets in the WHL. He'll be a top-line guy, should be well over a point-per-game player as he was last year, and if all goes well, this should be the final year that Colton Dach is playing junior hockey up in the WHL. So, yeah, I wish we could have saw more out of Colton throughout the preseason, but I have a feeling he's going to be back here sometime rather soon, and it could even be as early as this coming spring when his year in Kelowna comes to an end. Before I wrap up the show today, folks, I wanted to be sure to also go over the Blackhawks training camp roster, what remains of it at this point, and what we can kind of expect in the next few days before the season opener against the Avalanche on Wednesday night. So kind of taking a look at what the Blackhawks still have of their training camp roster as a whole, breaking it down into the 3 positions. At the forward group, things are pretty clear cut at this point. I'll go over all the forwards that seem quite likely to be part of the opening night roster, or they're going to be based on the numbers game at this point. We got Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Tyler Johnson, Andreas Athanasiou, Max Domi, Colin Blackwell, Sam Lafferty, Mackenzie Entwistle, Reese Johnson, Taylor Radish, Philip Kurashev, Jujhar Khaira, and Buddy Robinson. That's the Blackhawks forward group makeup right now. How many players is that? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. Yes. Those are the 13 that are going to be on the Blackhawks opening night lineup. Colton Dach is still around, of course, but he's going to go back to junior soon. And then Boris Tkachuk is out 4 to 6 weeks due to an ankle injury. So with Sakura going down, Philp going down, Sini going down, this is going to be the group for the Blackhawks on opening night. I already mentioned how I haven't really been too impressed with Buddy Robinson here in the preseason, and I'd personally rather have Sakura there. It's probably not going to matter all that much because I don't think Buddy Robinson's going to be playing too often, and once Boris Kachuk does come back, I expect he'll be the one that'll be shipped back down to Rockford if I had to guess. But yeah, there shouldn't really be any surprises up front for the Blackhawks. The only question is, how is Luke Richardson going to match this in terms of the line combinations? We've seen Taves up with Kane as of late. Tyler Johnson's been the man on the top line, kind of bumping Andreas Athanasiou down the lineup. We saw good things out of the second line of Kurashev, Domi, and Radish last night. Worth checking in on whether or not Richardson elects to stick with that pairing in the preseason finale tomorrow. We'll see what Colin Blackwell's role is, see exactly where Athanasiou slots in. But this is the forward group that the Blackhawks are going to have on opening night. Buddy Robinson, I would expect, is the extra forward. We'll see if Jujhar Khaira is healthy enough to be in the lineup. He's still kind of nursing an injury right now. But as I referenced earlier, only day-to-day, so I think the Blackhawks are hopeful that he'll be in the lineup on Wednesday in Colorado. On defense, obviously the Blackhawks are dealing with some injury woes right now. Caleb Jones is day-to-day with a shoulder problem. Connor Murphy's day-to-day with a back problem. Sounds like both of those two are expected to be in the lineup against the Avs on Wednesday. If that is the case, the Blackhawks will have a decor of Jones, Seth Jones, Caleb Jones too, Connor Murphy, Riley Stillman, and Jack Johnson. Those are the five, guaranteed older defensemen, but based on the numbers right now, there's still only three other defensemen left up for the Blackhawks: Alex Vlasic, Alec Regula, and Philip Rouse. Philip Rouse? I think it's Rouse. Still up for grabs. We're going to find out here shortly. But it's interesting what the Blackhawks are going to do on defense. You think Vlasic and Regula probably have the best opportunity right now. And personally, I thought Isaac Phillips was more of a standout than Philip Rouse was in this preseason. But one thing that could be working for Rouse is he's a little bit older, already has professional experience, got some good size to him. Thought he's been okay here in the preseason. But one thing worth noting, I saw this in an article by Charlie Roumeliotis last night. He said that there could be a clause in Rouse's contract where if he's not up with the Blackhawks this year, he'll be able to return to Sweden rather than play in the AHL. So I wonder if that's going to factor into the Blackhawks' decision here on who they're going to keep as their sixth and seventh defenseman. While it seems like Vlasic and Regula have the best chances right now, because of that contract clause, if that is in fact true, Philip Rouse might be sticking around for the long term. We'll see. There's also, the side of this where Vlasic and Regula probably could benefit from going back down to Rockford, and there's only a spot for one of them to be in the lineup as a regular, and even once Jake McCabe comes back, someone's going to be going down, so maybe it does make more sense to keep Philip Rouse around rather than Vlasic or Regula, but definitely going to be interesting to see what happens on defense for the Blackhawks in these final couple of days before the regular season kicks off on Wednesday. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up Friday, October 7th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks right now, wherever you get your podcasts, and go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And after the show, you got to be sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast to get all caught up on everything that went down in the offseason. It's free and available on all platforms, so be sure to go and check out Locked On NHL right now, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you all for tuning into today's episode. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And for any questions at all regarding anything related to the show or to the podcast, feel free to email lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com, all one word, lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com, or you can also hit me up on any one of my Twitter accounts. So until tomorrow's episode, thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.